In this video, we'll take a behind-the-scenes look at what it took to go from this to this. I'll talk about the challenges I faced along with the lighting, gear, and equipment I used on this recent travel job. So let's get into it.
It's going down like a rodeo. It's going down like I told you so. It's going down like a rodeo. It's going down like I told you so. I hope you're all here for the ride. Come inside, cause it's going down tonight. Only here for one night, no lies. Come inside.
All right, back with another video. I have fallen way behind and it feels good to be back. Somehow we're already halfway through February of 2025. I watched a lot of videos towards the end of the year. Everyone does their wrap-up videos, and the general consensus that I got was that 2024, for the majority of the people that I saw at least, had kind of a rough year. I heard a lot of people saying that they were feeling uncertain about this industry or their business in general. I'm not sure what to attribute it to, but fortunately for us, that just was not the case. Historically, Q4 and the weeks leading up to the holidays of any year is typically pretty slow, as clients have likely spent their budgets for the year. But since COVID, for whatever reason, we have been consistently busy and booked in Q4 and almost right up until the holidays, and that was the case for us in 2024. We enjoyed a short break with a little bit of downtime during the holidays and got right back into production, with our first job of 2025 being in the first week of January, which I'll be doing a video on, but I'm sitting on a bunch of backlogged content from jobs that we shot in Q4 of 2024, and I'm just now finally starting to get caught up. This job here was a week of production, and it was pretty far from my house. It was an 8-hour drive from where I live. The budget was there for me to fly in, but my preference, whenever possible, is to drive. I don't mind the drive. I'd much rather use my own kit and not have to worry about sourcing rental gear in an area that I'm unfamiliar with and coordinating pickup and drop-off times. So for me, it's just a lot easier to drive. This day started out very early in the morning. I loaded up most of the gear the night before and hit the road at 4 a.m. But like I said, I don't mind the drive. So here we go. If you haven't already seen any of my previous videos, I run a full-service production company with my wife, who is an amazing producer. So I work with her on all of the projects we take on, and she helps coordinate scheduling, planning, logistics, scoping out projects and budgeting, and really just any and all details that surround a production. And in this instance, on this job, it was a massive help. She could not be on location with me on this one, so in the weeks leading up to this job, she really put a lot of time in by meeting with the client over the phone and on video calls to coordinate how this week of production would play out. This one was particularly a little bit tricky. I was going to be filming a group of surgeons and high-level doctors, so we were going to be at the mercy of their schedule. So Nicole worked closely with our point of contact on the client side to make sure that we could get everyone that we needed to and do the best that we could in terms of scheduling and fit people in whenever their availability would allow. From the production side of things, there were several different aspects of this project, which included shooting somewhere between 30 and 35 corporate headshots. I shot a series of interviews along with teleprompter videos with about 15 different subjects. And I also shot B-roll at several different locations. So lots to manage and get through, which is why I'm so big on being prepared and planning things out leading up to any job. As is the case with most jobs these days, it was just me. There was no PA or sound recordist with me, So heading into a bigger job like this, you really want to make sure that everything is planned out so that you're familiar with what each shoot day will look like. Putting a schedule and call sheet together not only helps everyone get on the same page, but it also helps manage client expectations. I don't know what our contact on the client side of this project was expecting, but when they showed up and saw the setup and all of the gear and equipment that it took to get this project done right, they were definitely surprised and overall just really impressed by it. So, needless to say, I'm a huge proponent of pre-production. I'm sure I've said it in a previous video, but it's the most important part of any production, and it's often the most overlooked. Going into this project, the only thing I knew was that there was a conference room and a library that we were given access to. And so right away, I knew that the conference room probably wasn't going to be the better of the two, since it's not often that they make great spaces to film in. Once I arrived, I met up with my point of contact and first scouted the conference room, which, as I was already expecting, was not good. It was a very small space, and it would have been very challenging just to shoot headshots in. Next up was the library, which I was hopeful about. I was told that it was a space that doesn't get used, and so they have boxes and deliveries that get dropped there and just left since no one uses it. They did know that I was coming, but the space was pretty much a mess, and after nearly 9 hours on the road, I got straight to work. The first order of business was just to clean up and clean out the space so that I could start with a blank slate and know what I was working with and kind of where camera and lighting might potentially be living. There was a door that leads out to a very busy waiting room, and both of the hallways were also active with multiple offices adjacent to where we were filming. So, very challenging location in terms of noise and foot traffic, and just a difficult space overall to shoot in and make look good. I wasn't able to do the key light setup that I wanted to. Typically, I like to hang a rag or some diffusion on a T-bar and then push a source through it. But that just didn't work out on this one, and I had to come up with a different solution. I didn't overpack on this job. Typically, I do overpack, especially when I drive to a location. I just like to have access to things if I need them. But I ended up using every fixture that I brought with me. I knew right away that I wanted to shoot into the corner of the library to help give the frame some leading lines and help maximize the depth in the shot. So I ended up backing the camera pretty far into that corner, and the key light was kind of jammed up in that open doorway. I pulled the subject about as far away from the background as I could, and in regards to lighting, I didn't know if I'd be battling windows for exposure, so I brought a 600D, but ended up not needing that much output. So my key light is just an aperture 300D in the light dome, which is pushing through a 5-foot by 7-foot 5-in-1. The 300 gave me plenty of output to expose for the subject, even though I was pushing it through 2 layers of diffusion. I could have just keyed the subjects with the light dome and flooded the background with a hard light and called it a day, but whenever the time and space allow, I always make sure I go above and beyond to give our clients the most polished look possible, which is what I was after on this project. I knew that the key setup would be pretty straightforward and pretty simple in terms of setup. Typically, if you have a large key that is placed correctly, you'll already be about 80% there in terms of a good-looking final image. But in this instance, it was the total opposite, and the background was what was really going to be tricky. As you can see, there is absolutely no daylight spilling into the space, which meant that I had to augment the entire set with light. So I turned off all the practicals, and I'm just trying to get my head around what that scene is going to look like. I wanted to bring in the minimum amount of stands and gear just to help keep everything as neat and tidy as best I could. One of my favorite fixtures that I bring on every job, and I use it on almost every job, is the little Nanlite 60B and the projector. I love this thing. I travel with it everywhere. It goes on every job. Usually I'll use the projector to cast a slash of light on the wall, or maybe use a gobo to break up the wall and give it a little bit of texture. So I'm using the projector here to see what kind of spread I could get out of the 36-degree lens from across the room. And I pretty much knew right away that the projector wasn't going to work. There wasn't enough spread, and I'd have to figure out a different way to use it. I ended up putting the Fresnel and barn doors on it and mounted it on the far side of the room and high up on the bookcase. It's a punchy little light, and it did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of getting the background exposure closer to where I needed it to be. Here I'm using the Amaran T2C and getting it dialed in and connected up to Sidus Link. Since we were in a library, I wanted to play into the warm, cozy vibe that I was getting when I was first told that there was a library that we could shoot in. So I wanted to lean into that warmer vibe, and so I set all of the background lights you'll see here to 3200 Kelvin. And since my key light is just a daylight fixture, I knew obviously we were going to get some nice color separation between the warm tones from the background, and I could also use that as a motivation for a hair light kicker on the subject. So here you can see I've got a cheap light duty light stand up on the coffee table, which helped give me a little extra height out of the stand. One of the things I like about this setup is that I could mount multiple small lights to it and help keep the overall footprint and presence of gear down to a minimum. Mounted on the top of that stand, I've got the Molus G60 in the mini softbox with the grid attached. And that was giving me a little bit of wrap to kind of motivate the background and push some of that warmer light onto the subject. It also pulled double duty because of how I had it positioned. Since I had panned it mostly away from the subject, it was giving me a bit of lift and added some level on the right side of the background. And then I also have the X100 mounted on there as well, and I just mounted that with a small ball mount clamp. This is a great little light. It's super small and compact. It's easy to travel with and mount anywhere. But the downside is that at lower outputs, it just isn't very accurate. It's an issue that I ran into on this job, and I've seen a few other people talk about it as well. But there's a visible jump or a change in the light that happens when you go from 4% up to about 5 or 6%. And below that, the light is shifted towards green and isn't accurate at all, at least when it's set to 3200 Kelvin like I had it here. So in order to get the right temperature out of it, I had to set it to a higher output than what I needed. And because of that, I ended up using the dome diffuser on it to help knock down some of the intensity a little bit. I didn't want an even wash of light across the background, so I also used some gaff tape on the dome to help break up the light. I also used the G200 here with the Fresnel attachment, and I'm just experimenting with it here to see where it might best fit the look that I'm going for. I shot this on the FX30 for a few reasons. One was because of the Sigma 18-35. In this case, I wanted to shoot as shallow as possible in this space, and as much as I may want to leave that lens behind because of its weight, it still continues to be extremely useful for me, and I use it all the time. The second reason I shot on the FX30 was because of the 10-bit internal codec. That's one of my biggest gripes with the FX6, is that you have to shoot in the all-eye codec to get 4K 10-bit out of it. We were filming pretty much the entire day, and I didn't want to have to worry about swapping media or trying to back up footage on set. I'm hoping Sony will give us a firmware update that would allow 10-bit 4K recording in long-op, but I don't think it's very likely, and we'll have to wait and see. I did, however, set up my FX6 with the 24-70 as a second angle on a few of the subjects. I think I had set the lens to 70mm and 2.8, and the shots turned out great, but I would have loved to have an 85mm prime instead, but it's not a lens that's currently in my kit. Regarding audio on this project, since I was filming so many subjects, I didn't want to have to bother with a lav. So I used the Rode NTG3 boomed overhead, and that's going into the Tascam FR AV2, which is just a fantastic unit. I highly recommend it if you're solo and you need good peace of mind when it comes to audio. I can't speak to the battery life of the Tascam as I had it and the camera plugged into wall power for the day. I'm unable to share any other footage, but let me know in the comments what you thought of the final look and if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.